Now that I've got the minority leader here and the birthday girl, we're ready to start. I declare a quorum, and we will call the Senate Regulated Industries and Utilities meeting to order. We have two bills on our agenda today. Senate Bill 30, dealing with pari-mutuel wagering and job growth, and a constitutional amendment, Senate Resolution 53, to accompany that. Senator Beach, I'm going to give you all the time you need to present the bill, and we'll have questions. If you have other people, I see Mr. Moore here, that you want to assist you to get into some details, that's fine too, but I'll let you begin laying it out to us. Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members, for allowing me to present Senate Bill 30 and Senate Resolution 53. I also want to introduce Bo Moore, who's with me representing the Georgia Horse Racing Coalition, and I want to thank my assistant Megan Kelling for putting all these packets together. We've given you a lot of information to look at. I also want to thank the Dean of the Senate, Senator Harbison, for being my co-sponsor on this bill. Thank you, Senator, for co-sponsoring it. It's truly a bipartisan bill. Mr. Chairman, I bring before you the Rural Georgia Jobs and Growth Act. As you know, I have been very persistent for the last 6 years on horse racing and pari-mutuel wagering, and really growing the equine industry. And let me be clear, this bill does have pari-mutuel wagering and a horse racing component, which is why it's in your committee in Regulated Industries. But let me also be very clear that this is an economic development bill that will create substantial private investment and thousands of new jobs. I would also like to point out this bill is good for all of Georgia, especially rural Georgia. I'd like to quickly go through a line-by-line analysis and then review some bullet points on what benefits the Rural Georgia Job and Growth Act will bring to the state of Georgia. And then I'll answer any questions, and then I will go into Senate Resolution 53. But if you'll look in your packet that Megan handed out, I've got a line-by-line analysis right here, and I'll go through that. And if you look, obviously Section 1 is the title of the legislation, the Rural Georgia Jobs and Growth Act. 50-41-2 deals with the definitions of the bill. 50-41-3 is the creation of the Horse Racing Commission. There will be 5 commissioners, all appointed by the governor. They'll have staggered 4-year terms. And then the next 50-41-4 deals with the powers and duties of the Georgia Horse Racing Commission. If you go to page 2, and we start at Article 2 down the page, license requirements for owners and equestrian facilities, manufacturing of horse wagering devices, distribution of such devices. I'm going to hand out a handout. It's in your packet on historic racing machines and the revenue it produces in other states, especially Kentucky. I want to look at that. If you go down a little bit to 50-41-10, no more than 3 equestrian facility licenses may be issued in the state of Georgia. Each equestrian facility must be at least 125 miles away from each other, and equestrian facilities must have a minimum of 60 live days of racing. Requirements for an equestrian license, including a $500,000 non-refundable fee for applying, just to apply. 50-41, the last one on page 2, criteria for evaluating equestrian facility licenses, and one of them would have to be in the metro area within 50 miles of a major airport that has 5 runways, which is Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. If you go to the next page, look at 50-41-14, equestrian facilities licenses are for 10 years, and the annual renewal fee is $250,000. And then if you go down to the bottom of the page, it talks a little bit about the handle, and that's on page 25 of the bill, but it's 50-41-21. It talks about the distribution of live pari-mutuel wagering, the pools, 5% for purses conducted at the facility, 3.5% of commissions to be used to fund education, health care needs, and rural development in Georgia, 0.5 for breeder awards, 0.5 for treatment of any problem wagering and treatment centers, 0.01 for the UGA School of Veterinarian
medicine for the promotion and growth of equestrian racing and breeding industries, and .02 for the horse racing retirement. That's a big deal where these horses, when they finish racing, they have a retirement facility to go to. The next page, we deal with distribution of revenues from historic wagering machines. 20% monthly of the receipts will go to the state. And when you see what is going on in Kentucky, you'll see that's a very, very big number. If you look at 50-41-24, no equestrian facility can open in a county unless the county votes on the constitutional amendment, and then the local government later votes to approve a horse racing facility. So they have a double way to vote for that facility. If you look at 50-41-26.
Hold on just one second,
yes,
please. Yes, Ms. Leader.
It would be easier if you would give us the line number rather than the code number.
Okay.
Okay, we'll
All
ask
right,
the author to do that.
on that page, lines, I think, 748 to 754. This legislation provides exclusive authority to tax and licensing of parimutuel wagering. The next page really just talks all about what it prohibits, counterfeit instruments, cheating, so on, and what they would be looking at from a commission standpoint. And then on the final page, Article 4 deals with the interstate compact of licensures of participants in live racing and parimutuel wagering. And what that is every state that has horse racing would be part of this, and we would join that so we could do simulcast racing, and they could do simulcast racing with us. The governor would appoint one official to represent the state of Georgia on the compact committee for 4 years. So that's what that's kind of line by line. Now what I'd like to ask you to do is, if you could, take this out of your packet right here, the Rural Georgia Jobs and Growth Act. And I want to just kind of go through this, and I want to emphasize one thing. All this is private investment, and you'll see by the first bullet point, $550 million in initial investment in the state, $250 million in one track, $150 million in the other two tracks if we were to do 3 tracks. Again, no state investment, no tax breaks, no local subsidies, no development authorities, nothing. It would be all private investment. Number 2, we will create a new industry in Georgia, horse breeding and sales. That could have an overall annual $1 billion impact from an economic development standpoint. And I can tell you this, you cannot do horse breeding without a horse track. It just won't happen. You have to have the horse track component to do the horse breeding. And that's really where the money is in the breeding and the auctions. This will create thousands of new jobs throughout the state. I've got a chart that shows where each horse creates 20 jobs per horse. We have a letter that the Breeders' Cup has written us that we would be in contention to have a Breeders' Cup here. The Breeders' Cup is like the Super Bowl of horse racing. We believe that would be a $100 million impact that week of the Breeders' Cup to the state of Georgia. Very similar to Augusta National, brings in tourism. It would really help our tourism industry. This will create another unique event space to enable year-round events and attractions, very similar to what the Braves have done with the Battery. There'll be hotels and restaurants and so on. There will be no off-track betting in the state, no slots or table games. The only parimutuel wagering will only be at the track, so you won't be able to place a bet at a convenience store or anywhere else. It's going to only be at the track. The last one on page 1 that I think is key is 90% of the revenue bet on at the racetrack will come from other states and countries. So 90% of the revenue to help us fund education and so on will come from out of state.
Let me stop you right in there when you're talking about the revenue coming from the track. The simulcasting that you're doing, that will be at these various tracks. That's where it'll be done.
Yeah, I mean, you can go very similar to when we were at Keeneland, when we took a trip up there. After they finished racing that day, they had simulcasts of Gulfstream, and you could place a bet there at that track on that race at Gulfstream.
Would those type of simulcasts be done year-round or only when you were running the horses at the Georgia tracks?
Year-round, whenever racing is occurring, but it would have to be only at the racetrack. It's not going to be off-site. Now, I'm not sure what Chairman Mullis is going to do with sports betting. You know, I don't know how that's going to work if horse racing's involved in that. I know my son, for example, told me, and he was in Tennessee the other day, and he placed a bet on the NASCAR race. But I asked him, can he place bets on horse racing through the Tennessee sports betting app, and they do not allow that.
All right.
But it could. Some states are probably allowing that through their sports betting app.
Okay.
To bet on the Kentucky Derby.
I'll
I
let
don't
you-
know. But on this bill here, the only horse betting that would be available would be at the track, whether it's simulcast or live racing.
Okay, so it'd be year-round horse betting parlors at these tracks.
At the track only. You could go out there and have lunch, and it'd be very similar to the sports book at a Vegas deal.
Okay, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'll let you finish them.
No,
with
no.
other questions.
Senator Brash, you have a question? Or do you want to wait?
We'll let you finish it.
But as I stated, if you look at page 2, one of the things that a racetrack is necessary if we're going to be in the breeding business and be in the horse or equine industry here in Georgia. I know, Senator Alberts, you are from Louisville, and you know what Keeneland does as far as the auctions, and they sell those horses for millions of dollars, and the state of Kentucky gets 7% sales tax. The other thing is, you know, we would create a robust Georgia Horse Breeders Fund. Proceeds would be paid out to those owners, breeders who breed and raise and sell and race their horses bred here in Georgia. And I would say while the equine industry has existed in Georgia for many years, there's really no incentive for owners and breeders to actually breed and raise their racehorses here in the state. And I'm going to show you some, it's in your packet, and I'm going to show you some things later about what the state of Florida is doing, and a lot of Georgia dollars are going to the state of Florida. So we want to stop that. So I really do believe this, and I'll end on these quotes here. I know in closing on these, I would say this. You know, when we first got into the movie business, a lot of people didn't think we'd be very successful, and we weren't going to be able to compete in the movie business, and we've done very well. And I think we can do the same thing in the equine industry. A lot of people say we're not going to compete with Kentucky. I don't buy into that. I think Georgia, we can compete with Kentucky. Will we have the Kentucky Derby? Probably not, but we will have the Breeders' Cup and have some ability to compete. I will tell you in your packet here is the 20 jobs for one horse that I was talking about in this, and then attached to that is the letter for the breeders from the Breeders' Cup saying if we built a Keeneland type facility, we would be in line for a Breeders' Cup. The last thing I want to go through with you is this. Well, there's two things. One is in your packet, if you'll see this here. This historical racing, this is the machines where we get 20% commission, and there is a lot of money in these historical racing machines. And I would ask you to go to page 3 and just look at Kentucky. They have it at Kentucky Downs, Ellis Park, Keeneland, and Churchill Downs. And then if you look at the following page, the terminals they have and the revenue they've created. In 2017, they did $700 million in revenue, and in 2018, $1.37 billion, and the state of Kentucky got 20% of that. So the real money's in that as far as the ability for the state of Georgia to receive funds. The last thing I would show you is this. With the state of Florida, we put this in your packet, and if you look at the equine industry, it's been a $2.7 billion economic impact on Ocala. Ocala's where all these horses are, and they train. The veterinarians are down there. The auctions are down there. And I think we could really do well in the auction business with Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. We could bring people into Georgia to have auctions that would really bring a lot of money into our state. But if you look at this, just the jobs, 23,000 jobs, thoroughbred sales of $165 million. It's just a huge economic impact for the state of Florida. One of the things we have going for us is when it's too hot to race in Florida, it is too cold to race in Kentucky and New York. We have a perfect climate for that 60-day schedule where we could run races here. And I just think it would be a great economic impact, and it would help us grow the equine industry. And that's what I'm about, is trying to grow jobs. But it does have a pari-mutuel wagering component and a horse racing component. But I would just close with this, and then I'll take questions before I go to Senate Resolution 53. If we're going to pass sports betting, which I think is going to happen one day, and we can bet on the Falcons or the Braves, we should be able to bet on a Mucho Macho Man, for example. It's an athlete, and we should be able to have horse racing. And the difference between horse racing and sports betting, and I'm for sports betting. Chairman Mullis, I'm going to be a yes vote, and I'm all for it. I'm for all of it. But on horse racing, the thing that really differentiates us from sports betting is done from this right here, an app. Doesn't create a lot of jobs. This will create jobs. It'll create capital investment, construction investment, and it'll create, like I said, long-term jobs and investment with private money, no tax dollars. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for allowing me to present this bill. As you know, you've heard this for a long time, 6 years now, and eventually I'm hoping we can go and hear them say they're off and they're racing. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
I'll recognize Senator Brass, my vice chairman, for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Beach, for bringing this bill before us. I want to touch on, or you to clarify on this last point of the packet, the 90% of the revenue bet on races at track will come from other states and countries. Is that meaning the tourism, them coming physically to the location?
I think it's a combination of both. A lot of it will be through simulcasts, but a lot of it people will come and they will be here for a convention, and they'll go out to the track. And
so if someone's at a track in, say, Kentucky, they can bet on if we've allowed this, they bet on a horse race here in Georgia.
Correct.
Some of that money would come to us.
Correct.
Then could we just allow horse racing and no betting?
What's that?
If that money's
Except-
coming here,
Yeah, take the bets from out-of-state people only.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think
Well,
that,
I say that kind of jokingly, but kind of. But in all seriousness, though, I'm trying to get a grasp for how the simulcast works. I mean, what percentage,
well, you got
if they're betting from another state, what
Well-
percentage do we get? And then when our people are betting at our track, what percentage of that does that track keep? How does that transaction work?
Mr. Chairman, Bo Moore with Connect South here on behalf of Georgia Horse Racing Council. That, almost all that is simulcast money. So now that technology has advanced and everybody is betting on their phones, that has just grown exponentially. So it's 80 to 90% of the proceeds at all tracks now are bet from off-site. Simulcast usually from mobile phones in other states or countries.
I think so. All right.
All right.
Thank you.
I recognize Senator Alvers
Stand
for a
up.
question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, Bo might need to get up for this, so I'm trying to follow the logic that Vice Chairman was bringing. So if the race is held in Georgia,
Right.
and I'm physically there and I'm the person betting on it, we're going to get X percentage of that will be taxed under Georgia based on this legislation. What happens if that race is happening in Kentucky and somebody's just there betting on it, or vice versa?
So there is a tax, like if you're at the Georgia track and you're betting on the Derby or Keeneland or one of the other tracks, there is a tax on the simulcast. It's agreed upon among the pact, but we will also be getting tax money that's where we're betting on tracks in other states as well. It goes both ways.
So what's the breakdown of those dollars, though, and percentages? Obviously, I'm assuming it's going to be a lot different as a person here for a race here versus a race somewhere else, right?
I'll get you some more information, but it depends on what the compact says, and they decide, and then the state taxes that based on whatever you're currently taxing your tracks at.
Okay, that makes sense. And then this might be for either of you. I agree with Senator Beach. I have been to Churchill Downs, and we actually both were at the Kentucky Derby together the year before. My question is, I know a lot of the tracks have struggled over the last many years. In the last numbers I saw, about half of them were unable to survive. What would be different about this, and how would that make sure they'd be able to survive on its own without any other things needed to help that survive?
You know, that's a good question, but I would tell you it's private investment. And I'd give you this analogy. If you were going to open a steakhouse across the street from Bones, you're probably crazy, but you have the right to do that. And if you go out of business, you go out of business. And, you know, you look at the NASCAR facility, they got a second race again this year, which is good because they were concerned by not having 2 races out at, but that's not the state's problem. That's Bruton Smith owns that track. It's private, and we don't need to subsidize that track. And I would tell you, we're not going to subsidize this either. We're not going to have any public investment in this. It's all private investment, and they think Atlanta's a great market. They know Georgia's growing, and they think they can be successful here.
Thanks.
On the historical racing machines,
Yes, sir.
I mean, those are basically designed as like a slot machine type function, right?
Correct.
Okay. Do the folks in this industry believe that a track can be financially successful without, I'm just going to call them slot machines because I think that's pretty close
Yeah.
to what they are. Can a track survive just on live racing and the simulcast economically, or do you need this stream of?
Well, I think
revenue.
they need this stream income, but so do we, because that's where, as you saw in Kentucky, they're doing $1.2 billion in revenue and making 20%. That's where the tax money's coming from, and where they're really making their tax dollars from a state's perspective. So I would say to you this: we want those now. We don't want blackjack. We don't want any kind of other casino things. We just want the historic racing machines, and that's, I think it's important for the experience, number one, but it's also important for their revenue. But I think it's important for the state's revenue too.
And I've been thinking about this week as we're going to be hearing the sports betting bill on Thursday afternoon. Explain to us the difference between sports betting on teams or whatever and pari-mutuel betting on a horse race.
Well, pari-mutuel wagering is when everybody pools their money into a race, and then the odds go up and down on the horse. Whoever's betting more on one horse, the odds go down, and vice versa. But it's the pool of money that's then split in that one race, that bet. And you want to add to that, but now on a football game, you're just, I guess, betting over under, or you're betting the point spread.
Kind of against the house.
Yeah,
Right.
in horse racing, you're not betting against.
You got to talk in that microphone for us, Bo.
Mr. Chairman, in pari-mutuel betting, you're not betting against the house. There's no book. You're just gambling amongst your co-bettors at the track. So there's a pari-mutuel pool. Whatever's left over is the handle and broken down as according to the bill. In sports betting, you have a book, or the sports bet entity. So in Georgia, horse racing is currently legal. You can race horses in Georgia, back to your point, Senator Brass, but you cannot pari-mutuel bet. That is prevented in the Constitution, so that's why this constitutional amendment is necessary.
If we pass sports betting, is there any, I don't know, market or whatever for betting on horses in a non-pari-mutuel way? You know, just like we set odds on a football game or over/under, could you say bet X amount of dollars to win horse number one, and they'll pay 3-2? Could you predetermine those odds, or
Yes,
anybody do that?
Yes, some other states do that. I think New Jersey may do that, but there's some other states where the track acts as the book. And so the odds are not based on who is betting on which horse, but the odds are based on what the bookmaker.
The odds maker
for
picks who
example,
has most likely to win.
Yeah, it'd be example like if you bet on a football game 2 weeks out, the odds may be one thing. If you wait right for kickoff, it may be another thing. It would be
Right.
similar in horse racing.
You guys have any interest in that?
Sure.
Okay.
Of course.
right.
I mean,
Senator-
I don't want to confuse Senator Beach's bill, but that would be something that would be another option.
It could be amended. Senator Lucas, question.
Yeah. Where would they be located? I see in the bill, no closer than 125 miles.
That's for the, well, one of the tracks has to be within 50 miles of a international airport with 5 runways, and there's only one of those in the state, and it's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. So one of them will be here, and that will be the one that's the $250 million investment. There's the opportunity for 2 more somewhere in the state with a $125 million licensing fee, but they have to be 125 miles apart.
Well, Columbus is not 125 miles from Atlanta. Chatham County is. Hawkinsville is.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
I mean-
that excludes Macon. We're not 125 miles away from Atlanta. Columbus is not 125, it's about 110. Chatham County is 200-some miles from Atlanta. So where else would you put it?
I'm not going to get into where, I mean, I don't want to be part of the land acquisition or where it would go. I do know one needs to be here in Metro Atlanta within 50 miles of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Now, if we want to change it from 125 miles to 100 miles or 110 miles or whatever, I'm open to doing that.
Well, I'm looking at jobs. I need plenty of jobs in Hancock County.
Yeah.
You know, I got plenty of land, plenty of water.
Well, I can tell you, I was at the Kentucky Derby 2 years ago with Senator Albers, and Governor Kemp was in the suite where I was in, and my roommate at LSU is a horse trainer, and he came in and said the jobs aren't at Churchill Downs, the jobs are 100 miles away, and the real money for Kentucky is not in Churchill Downs or in Louisville. It's in Keeneland and these horse farms and these auction houses outside of Churchill Downs. So I can tell you, I would envision that here, that really the money's going to be in rural Georgia in the horse farms, the breeding, and so on. The racetrack will be here.
We used to breed horses in Greenville, Georgia.
Okay.
The thoroughbreds, the race at Kentucky Derby. They used to train them and breed them up there in Greenville, Georgia.
We can breed them all over. We've got lots of equestrian facilities in the state.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I assume most of the investment will be private investment?
All of it will be private. It's very specific in this bill that there will be no public money at all.
The reason I asked, I think the senator from the 56th and the chairman kind of addressed it, but when it comes to horse racing tracks, a lot of times you see them having to combine with the casino in order to maintain some sort of, sustain their activities.
Well, the folks that we've been in touch with from the Georgia Horse Racing Coalition and so on have said they do not need a casino. They just need horse racing, and they can make it, and that Georgia's a special place, and we can be, or they can be successful. And I think we as a state will be successful.
Thank you.
Senator Brass, I recognize you, and then I got Senator Gooch on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I kind of want to follow up with what Senator Lucas was saying, and you used the analogy of putting a steakhouse across from Bones. If it's all private, that's their right. So what's the thought process on putting that 125-mile limit in there, or minimum in there? Because it seems to me it's a little contradictory there. If it's private investment,
We can take it out. I don't see anybody building 2 tracks next door to each other. But
right?
We don't have to have that in there if you don't want. But I definitely think we need to have one within 50 miles of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. We are going to be back in the convention business one day when COVID-19's over, and we need to have this somewhere where the convention business, when they're here, they could have some entertainment.
But then we're directing private business where they need to put their business. Is that?
I'm not going to say where they need to be. I just think they
Yeah.
need to be somewhere within the metro Atlanta area for the big track, for the one track.
But you'd be amenable to taking that 125-mile
Yeah.
off. Okay.
Okay, we can take that out.
Senator Gooch, you're recognized for a question.
Chairman, are there any other people signed up to testify
I
against? the
do.
bill?
I have Mike Griffin and Paul Smith that would like to speak against.
My question for the author of the bill is the groups of people, I don't know if it's PETA or other horse advocate groups that oppose horse racing. What is their argument against it, and what can you do in Georgia to help satisfy their concerns?
Well,
A lot of that comes from Santa Anita out in California, where they've had so many horse deaths recently, and I don't know that they've explained why, but
Okay.
Senator Beach might know a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm not sure about Santa Anita, but I can tell you this, that we address that in the bill from a retirement standpoint, and I will tell you why thoroughbreds are racing. They are treated pretty well. When you spend $250,000 to $1 million on a horse, they're fed well, they're taken care of, they're bathed, those horses are treated pretty well. So I can tell you that what I'm worried about is when they retire, I want to make sure that they're not just put out to pasture, that they're taken care of from that standpoint. And that's why we have that small amount of money in there to do that.
Senator Harbison, did you have a question on the Columbus Central? You got it answered? Okay. I'll recognize Senator Kennedy for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Beach, I'm trying to sort of follow the revenue that is anticipated from the business model that would be created by this legislation. And if I understand it, it would be 2 or 3 buckets. One would be simulcast betting.
Correct.
Is that right? 2 would be some sort of slot machines or
Well, historic racing machines,
historic
yes.
racing machines. Would the third be parimutuel betting during race days?
Yes.
Is there a 4th bucket, or is that generally the 3 sources of where the revenue would come from?
Those are the 3 sources.
Can you tell us what?
And the largest one, to be honest with you, Senator, is those historic racing machines. There is another source, and that is when we really get into the breeding and the auctions, there will be a big bucket of money there, too, in which the state will receive 7% sales tax on every sale of any horse.
Okay.
So there would be a 4th bucket when we get up and going. Now, that's going to take 5 to 8 years to really
Sure.
get a Georgia-bred program.
My question is, can you tell us what the anticipated percentages of those 3 buckets, what the anticipated revenue from each would be? Not dollars, but just how much is going to be simulcast versus how much parimutuel versus how much
You got that?
machines?
Well, it's the historical racing machines are 20%. So if they do $500 million in revenue, it's 20% of that.
No, I'm not asking about the revenue for the state. I'm asking for the revenue for the business owner. Does most of it come from the simulcast races? Does it come from parimutuel betting? Where does it
You
come
want to
from?
answer that?
Most of the revenue for the horse owners actually will come from the breeding, but there's in line.
I mean the owner of the facility. I'm sorry, I didn't ask that very well.
So the owner facility, if you look at the percentages, this is what's called the handle. So you take the 5%, 5% in the different percentages that go to the different groups.
It's on page 25 of the bill, line 607
Okay.
through 623.
So Chairman Kennedy, the way this will work is the balance of the takeout will go to the operating, to the owner of the facility. So you take the handle which means that, let's say, $60 of the $100 bet on that particular race goes back to the winners, the people who bet on the winning horses. Then you take the 40% that's left over of the handle, and that's how it's broken down. So whatever's left after that goes to the owner of the racetrack.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I've got a couple of follow-ups. Do you know how many days a year they race the horses up in Kentucky?
I think they have 2 meets, 60 days, but at 2 different times of year.
All right. And I have this mental image of a lot of the horse races kind of migrate from Florida to Kentucky to New Jersey or whatever. It's sort of a circuit, let's
Correct.
say. They have different seasons in each of those. And I envision that a lot of these employees are kind of like the you know, the traveling show, the circus, or the fair, that they're moving along with the horses, the people that are shoeing them and grooming them and training them and all that. Is that accurate, or are these year-round jobs here?
I would tell you, I think it's a little of both. I think that we have a great opportunity to really have some veterinarians stay here in our state that are doing large animal veterinarian type work, that they would stay here now, and stay here year round. But there are some that travel, that, you know, trainers, they go from place to place. I mean, and the folks that are the jockeys obviously go from track to track. You got any comments on that, Bo?
Another question I have is in the licensing requirements. In order for somebody to be granted a license to run one of these horse racing facilities, you require a successful history of operating a horse racing track in the previous 5 years. Doesn't that essentially bar any Georgia business from opening a track, because you would have to have been in a state that allowed horse racing for 5 years before you could even apply to run a business here?
Okay, what line is that, Mr. Chairman?
I was reading off the summary from Senate Research, so I can't cite you to a specific line.
Oh, I got you. I see what you're talking about on page 2 of 3, correct, of this summary. That's 5% of the stock. Is that what you're talking about? The commission must consider all applicants that have a majority of owners individually possessing at least 5% of the stock or membership, which can demonstrate a successful history of operating a horse racing track in previous 5 years. Is that what you're talking about?
That's
Yeah.
right.
And the reason we put that in there, Mr. Chairman, is that we want this to be successful, and we want the proper folks running this facility. And as you also will see in the next, the applicant who is awarded a license must pay the commission a $50 million fee within 10 days. So these people need to know what they're doing, and they need to be serious, and it's going to be, there's a lot of investment in this. And then they pay a fee every 10 years of $250,000 renewal fee. So we want to make sure we've got the right people building these facilities. It's on paragraph 3 of page 2. An applicant awarded a license must pay the commission $50 million within 10 days. A facility license will be good for a term of 10 years, and the renewal fee will be $250,000. I can find it in the bill, but I don't have the line number on that, Senator, I'm sorry, but I think it's, let me see. I apologize. I thought it was on page 20, but I don't see it. Oh, where it is. It's on lines 489. Upon the award of an equestrian facility license, the applicant shall cause $50 million to be paid to the commission within 10 business days, or such license shall be revoked as a matter of law. Any person holding a license to operate a licensed equestrian facility in the state pursuant to this chapter shall be authorized to conduct pari-mutuel wagering on horse racing. You see that on, it's page 20. And then it goes on to talk about on 497, an equestrian facility license may renew its license for a fee of $250,000, and the renewal should be granted unless the commission determines that there is reason to revoke the license after 10 years.
Why such high licensing fees and such high financial requirements? This is seeming like we're shrinking the universe of potential people to participate in the game. Is there a reason why you would have to have $50 million to run one of these?
You got
So, Mr. Chairman, this came from a previous administration. They wanted to make the floor as high as possible to make sure whomever or whatever company got involved with these tracks was legitimate and real, and all these fees are based on license fees in other similar states like Kentucky, Florida, Indiana, similar states like that.
Do you know we'll just call it the industry nationwide, how many players there are? I mean, how many track operators?
Not off the top of my head, but I'll be happy to find that out for you.
All right. Senator Albers, I recognize you for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bill, you might want to stay there. Over the last several years, can you tell us about a new track that was built and developed and where, and how they're doing right now?
Not off the top of my head, but I can track that down for you. One thing that's changed the industry dramatically is the mobile betting. One of the largest sports betting industries, particularly during COVID, was horse racing, and it's bumped the purses up exponentially. But I will get you some information about new tracks and how they've done. Chairman Couser, I'll get you some information about who are the biggest industry players.
If you will, that would help us, and I will get that out to the committee. Since this is a hearing only, it'll get them the information. But in the event we bring this back for a vote later, they'll be educated a little bit better. Okay. But y'all are doing a great job educating. Senator Harbison, I'm going to recognize you for a question there.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, what I would want to do, I'm in a position where I have a constituent, I believe at Fort Benning, who offered some input. The name is Anna Marie Albaugh. I thought, when I saw Anna Marie, I thought that was affiliated with us. But she is, I want to make sure I got that in the record. She said she's against pari-mutuel betting, or the horse racing, I should say. She contends that 70% of active racetracks are dependent on casinos. We've dealt with every issue she brought up, but I wanted to make sure that I put her comments, some of her comments, into the record.
Okay.
And she's saying that gambling on horse racing is in decline. State subsidies, and of course he's just alluded to the fact that it's private investments, if I got that right. So I just want to make sure. Okay. And she's asking us to look at the things that I thought some of the questions dealt with about the horses dying and that kind of information. And Senator Beach dealt with that earlier, but I wanted to make sure I got her name and some of her comments she offered in this sheet, and I can provide this to every member of the committee. And she wanted to fund kids over horse racing, spectrum gambling study, main report, and lastly, that handle does not equal revenue in sports betting or daily fantasy sports, and why it matters to get it. And she wanted to know why I support it. I support it because I think there's an opportunity for us to expand employment and have a greater economic impact for our educational purposes in the state of Georgia.
All right. Yeah, I have been attending national conferences, a group called NICLGs, which is National Conference of Legislators from Gaming States, if I remember the acronym correctly. And we went to a track up in Connecticut a couple of years ago, and there was literally 2 people in the room, and there were no horses running. They had the simulcast going, and they also had looked like a casino with slot machines that was hopping pretty good. And I asked the man where you placed your bet on horse races overseas or wherever they were, what's the average age of the horse racing bettor? And he looked at me straight in the face and said, dead. And you mentioned this woman that the sport is dying out. It sounds like from what we're hearing now from some of the authors is that young people are getting more into it now that you have phone apps and things. So hopefully it will survive. But there has been some decline, apparently. Other questions? I got Senator Tippins. I recognize you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Beach, you'd made the statement that there would not be any public funds involved in any of this. Would your bill allow for any tax credits or local incentives either local or state, to be used for the development of this?
No, it's all private investment. I've been pretty clear and adamant about that.
In light of the fact that the Supreme Court has ruled that other tax credits are not state revenue and therefore would not count on the books as assets, would a local government or the state be precluded from having tax credit incentives to bring these facilities into the state?
And the only thing I could see is that a development authority, for example, and that's what you do, Senator Ginn, correct, could maybe be involved in saying we would, if you bring the track here, we can give you a tax abatement. But there's nothing in this bill that allows state funds for a parking deck or any kind of structures to help build the facility.
Do you think the general public would see that as a basically a gratuity from state to incentivize the construction?
I mean, I probably would say that it would be an incentive if they did a tax abatement. I mean, you know, we've got a battery plant right now that we've done a lot of investment in that's not going to be built right now, and we've put a lot of money into that. So, but I'm not saying that we should put money. I'm being very adamant that we do not need to put any state dollars or state incentives for this facility.
Okay, thank you. When it talks about the revenue from historic gaming machines, and it talks about net receipts, it says that 20% of the net receipts will be paid into the state. Is that correct?
Correct.
But when you look at the definition of net receipts, all payouts on that are subtracted from the gross receipts, correct?
Wait, run that by me again now. The gross receipts minus
The
payouts?
Net receipts are gross receipts minus the payouts and 2 or 3 other categories of expenditures it may be in there. So the state would basically net 20% of this. Of the net receipts, which it's not the gross receipts, it's the net. Under Georgia Lottery, we're getting right now about 26% of gross receipts. So how would you anticipate that the tax revenue off these gaming expenditures would compare with the Georgia Lottery? But since the Georgia Lottery has 26% over every dollar spent on gaming, this is after the payout, so whatever they pay and is subtracted off of that on.
I'll have to get back with you on that. I need to see what they're doing in Kentucky. I do know that it's been very, very profitable for the state of Kentucky.
Okay. One other question, if I might. I've noticed in here, starting in Section 3, we've got 11 pages in this bill that deals with precluding wrongdoing.
Correct.
Potential for fraud or deceiving people. Is that normal in a economic development bill?
Well, in this bill, you need it for, you're dealing with parimutuel wagering and gaming, and you need to have every safeguard put in place, and that's what we're doing.
Well,
and we're giving the Racing Commission all the tools in the toolbox to make sure it's done right.
I understand that, but I think the general public views that with these type activities, there are certain activities that go along with that. Would you say that because of the nature of this, that is the reason we have to have 11 pages in the bill to deal with potential wrongdoing that goes with this industry?
We didn't want to leave any stone unturned.
Thank you.
All right, that's all the questions for now.
Mr. Chairman, would you like me to do the resolution real quick before we go to comments?
Right ahead.
Because this will take just a second, if you would. But basically, one of the things we have to do is if we're going to pass Senate Bill 30, we have to do a constitutional amendment to ask the voters of Georgia if they would like to have horse racing and parimutuel racing. So we've got Senate Resolution 53. And really, all it is it's a constitutional amendment, and the real question is lines 54, 55. And it says, shall the Constitution of Georgia be amended so as to authorize pari-mutuel wagering betting on horse racing in the state under certain circumstances? All persons desiring to vote in favor, vote yes. Desiring to vote against and ratify, vote no. So that's the real crux of this. I would tell you this, that in my last two primaries, I had opposition, and I had mail pieces with me, and I don't know how they put me behind a slot machine, and they put me at a blackjack table, and they put me in the winner's circle at a race, and yeah,
Photoshop.
So it was unbelievable. Well, and they doctored these pictures, but because I've never been in those situations. But listen, my district, as Senator Alvarez can tell you, is a very conservative district. Woodstock Baptist Church is one of the largest Baptist churches in the state, and I was out there, and I was the gaming guy, and I won by 15 points and 19 points. So I could tell you this: I don't think anybody is going to lose a primary or general election letting the voters decide whether they want pari-mutuel wagering. There's nothing wrong with letting the voters decide. And I will tell you, I put in your packet, this was done in February 2019, but it was some polling that was done by the Georgia Horse Racing Coalition. And if you look at number 3 on this, that's in your packet, 66% of the voters in the state are back allowing horse racing, and it's across party lines. 63% Republicans, 64% Independents, 70% Democrats favor allowing horse racing. 72% in this poll allow the voters to have a right to vote. So I just would tell you that I think there's nothing to be scared of by allowing the voters to vote, and I would always say that they have the right to vote. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I want to just thank you for hearing both Senate Bill 30 and Senate Resolution 53, and appreciate y'all's time.
You have provoked a question from our President Pro Tem. I recognize you, Senator Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for bringing this bill. Gentlemen, I've lost the page number, but it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was $50 million for a 10-year contract?
Correct.
And it renews for $250,000?
Correct.
And what period of time does it renew for?
When it gets renewed?
I didn't see that in there. Was it 12 months?
A year, yeah.
It was 12 months?
After 10,
Okay.
yeah, after 10 years.
So it's $50 million for 10 years.
And then
$250,000 a year?
Yeah.
It's quite a contrast. But that's just what I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
You need to own a Honda dealership to do this.
Since you mentioned the Baptist Church, we just so happen to have Mike Griffin here today to speak, see what the Georgia Baptists believe about this, different than those Kentucky Baptists. Come on up, Mr. Griffin.
Let me get out of here. Excuse me.
Does he have one of you on the front row of the First Baptist Church?
I've kept him employed for 6 years. He likes me.
I need 6 more then. I like this by this, you can preach and have the door right here. I like that. You can get away from them quick. But anyway, my name is Mike Griffin. I'm the Public Affairs Representative for the Georgia Baptist Mission Board. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the committee for allowing me an opportunity just to say a few words to you. This is only the 7th time I've done this. We continue to deal with this. 7 years ago, it was, we just want to race horses. We don't want any casinos, and this is going to be very benign. It's going to be very innocent, not any problem with it. And now, next thing you know, we've got the casinos too, and destination resorts. And you say, no, we're talking about horse racing. Well, if you take your phone out right now and just type in the word historic horse racing machines, okay? And you just hit images, and you tell me if you can figure out whether you're in a casino or a horse track. You won't be able to tell. And let me tell you why. It's because horse tracks can't make the money off of just racing right there. And don't take my word for it. All up and down the Northeast, they've been closing these tracks. They closed them all in Virginia pretty much, and they brought back and allowed historical horse racing machines 2 or 3 years ago. And so now they're back booming again. So what these end up being are just sort of a casino type environment where you have all this racing. You're racing all over the world. It's just. I tell you what it is. It's gambling. And that's why you have to have 11 pages of regulation, because it is so corrupt. And it brings that into our state. We, for 7 straight years, have been the number one place to do business. And we've not had to introduce more predatory gambling in our state to be able to be that. Now, let me just mention this, whether you agree on the moral issue or not. How about the economic side? Dr. Earl Grinnells and Professor John Kent from the University of Illinois, who both testified under oath before Congress in 2012 and I think in 15, proving the stats, and I have them here, that for every dollar you raise in tax revenue on gambling revenue in general, whether it's pari-mutuel betting, casinos, sports betting, it costs you another 3 in social expense. So if you're looking at the sports bill that we're looking at over in the House the other day, looking at $50 million, cost the state $150 million in additional expense. Again, these are just some of the things just to bear in mind. And also, when it comes to the referendum, let the people decide. Well, it won't be a fair vote. Let me tell you why. For every dollar we spend to try to stop the referendum, they're going to spend $250. Now, I don't know if anybody could get reelected if you were outspent 250 to 1. So all that glitters is not gold, but they will make it look like it. And many of you are sitting here today, and I think I can remember once or twice that a ballot initiative didn't pass once it got before the state for a constitutional amendment. And let me tell you why. It's because they trust you. They don't believe you would let something get out there that you didn't think would be something good for the state. So it's not going to be a neutral position here that you're taking. You can't back off and say, oh, we just want to let the people decide. No, they're asking you to get granular so that the people don't get deceived into this whole thing. If you went out to the Georgians right now and you asked them, what are your top 5 priorities for the state legislature, you're not going to find this in it. If you go out and poll people, 70, 80%, oh, yeah, that's fine. I'm for voting on that. But it's not a priority. And it's not the thing that I think we need to be spending our time on in our state. And so I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share this with you again, and hope you'll give this some serious consideration and not move this bill any further. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Recognize Senator Mullis for a question.
Always, my friend, Senator Mullis always has a question.
I am pro-life, and thank you for being here. I appreciate
Yes,
you keep things in front of us that we need to see. But I have a couple questions. Are you aware that gambling is legal in Georgia?
There's a lot of things that you probably wouldn't want to have more of.
Okay, is that a yes?
Well, if you have a fire in your house or in your yard,
and
you want to put water or gas on it?
Well, I would.
I put water on it.
Okay,
this would be
asked
gas.
me a question,
I think.
you didn't allow me, but I just wanted to let you know that gambling's already been legalized by Governor Miller, and I voted for Governor Miller that year because I was for the Hope Scholarship. Now I know you and I have had this discussion before about, you have resisted the Hope Scholarship. Resist is probably a strong word, but you don't have any family members that have used it.
I would not resist the Hope Scholarship. It's the funding mechanism that's been our concern through the years.
Okay, but it is still funded by gambling.
I understand.
And
again, this is do you want more?
Well, I would say that the Hope Scholarship and the amount of students using it is going to cross soon, and we got to find ways of funding that.
Well, you're not going to see a lot of hope in this.
Good.
Because I said along the lines, y'all, we got to make sure that we don't make money.
So
the standard over morality. It's going to be horses for hope. Money for
what
marijuana,
should I tell my
pennies
senior
from
friends?
prostitutes one day.
That's the oldest profession, I understand. It's in the Bible. Is that correct?
What's that?
What you just said.
Well, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, moving on. I wanted to point out
there's a lot of sin in the Bible. Go
Amen,
ahead,
brother. I want to point it out.
Talks about sin.
Damn, I can't even remember what I was going to point out now.
I'm sorry.
What?
You was talking about sin, I'm sorry.
Sin.
You do know the Legislative Prayer Fellowship meets tomorrow morning at 7 a.m.
Thank you, and I follow your lead, Mr.
403.
Chairman. Let's see, I actually have a bill before committee at 7 in the morning. But anyway, I have to pass because I can't remember what I was about to
We
say.
can come back to you.
All right,
Other
we'll come
questions? Senator Gooch, I recognize you for a question there.
I'm going to ask you this question, Mike, not as a for it or against it question, but if the polling information that we see is correct, who do we listen to back home? The 50% for it or the 50% against it? Because it is teetering half and half. So I'm struggling to answer that question. You said you can't just say it's up to the voters to decide. Who do we listen to on this issue? Because I'm torn on this.
Well, when you run for your office, you tell them what you believe.
Right.
And then when you come down here, you get the privilege to make that choice. And every 2 years, they get to make the choice on you. And there's no doubt there's a culture shift towards some things that were not culturally accepted years ago. But again, we can't go back to the Bible and say we're just going to let every man do what is right in his own eyes. You and I have to look at our children and our grandchildren. And when I ran for state rep in 2006, they're like, what are you going to do if people in your district want you to vote one way and you're going to vote the other? And I said, well, in 2 years from now, you can change my mind. I mean, you can change your mind by changing me. I'm going to tell you what I believe. Don't vote for me now. I'm going to stand because I want to do what is right to protect your children. And there's just no doubt that this is, the old saying is the families that pray together stay together. It's not the families that gamble together that stay together. And when you're talking about 12 to 14,000 kids in foster care, I don't think that would be helped if they would just gamble a little more. And I think you just say, look, I'm just going to put your interest above any type of financial interest. I think you just continue to do what you believe would be the right thing and accept those consequences. Thank you.
You made a comment about the additional social costs. Do you have any idea the experience in the state of Kentucky where they've had legalized horse races for a long time, what type of problems they might have experienced with compulsive gambling or whatever else?
I don't know what the extension of their gambling laws are regarding horse racing, pari-mutuel betting there. I know there's a tremendous historical significance of what they're doing and how it's pretty much more limited to literal horse racing than it is all the other things. I'm not sure about all that. I know that just in Tennessee, their figures on addiction have went through the roof since they did sports betting just within a year. So again, that ends up costing the taxpayer money.
I just was wondering if you had any hard data.
I don't know, but I'd be interested to look at.
Senator Mullis, are you past your senior moment and ready to ask the other question?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually have recalled what I want to say, but Senator Gooch kind of filled it in. And Senator Beach, are you coming back?
Yes.
Okay, I'll finish with Senator Beach. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I'm going to recognize Paul Smith, my constituent.
Thank you,
Let's
Mr.
hear
Chairman.
from you. Thank you, Mike. You
Thank
may
you,
want
Mike.
to stay handy. And I have one additional name to sign up, and we're running out of time. So, Paul, if you'll share your thoughts, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak. My name is Paul Smith with Citizen Impact. We're a network of pastors all across Georgia. In fact, one of those pastors was here today meeting some of the legislators from the Macon area. And next Tuesday, we'll have about 90 signed up for our annual Pastors' Day. And it is true. I agree with much of what, if not everything Mike said. He has his own way of saying things. But that our organization, the pastors I represent, are morally opposed to any kind of expansion of gambling. And I suppose that in reality, we are asking you to make a moral choice here rather than necessarily what the polls say. But I do want to point out a couple of other things that I think are worth mentioning that may not fall into the category of morality. I think that trying to avoid cliches like the nose of the camel's in the tent or the slippery slope. It would be hard to argue that once we get horse racing and gambling on horse racing, that we won't get the next type of gambling. Once we get sports gambling, it'll be easier to get gambling on horse racing and casinos. Again, trying to avoid cliches, but you all understand, I think, what I mean about the nose of the camel in the tent. I think it'll begin that slope. I think it'll be very difficult to do one without the other. I'll also comment on the idea of letting the voters decide. Admittedly, that's a strong argument to make, but without exactly repeating what Mike said, I do think that once it's on the ballot, it'll be very hard for those of us who oppose it to overcome the marketing, the advertising, all the things that will be spent to convince people. And I don't want to sound argumentative, but I think if the ballot question were more clear about what was happening, if the ballot question, when it comes to casinos, it says destination resorts. I don't think that's clear. When it comes to parimutuel betting, I'm not sure that it's clear that, for example, $3 in a social cost will be spent by the state for every dollar in revenue. So it's just hard to overcome the ballot question. So again, I could say more, but I'm trying to be brief and respectful of your time.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to recognize our senator from the University of Louisville, Kentucky, for a question. Senator Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Proud alumni. Question for you. We mentioned the word moral, and that really struck me for a moment. I think when my mom and I went, and she took me to the track when I was a kid, would you say my mother and I were immoral by being there? No, she took me home. Thank you. I'm not advocating for either side, but are we saying that when my mother took me there and we had lunch and we saw the ponies and she bet $20 that she was immoral?
I'd rather not comment on your mother and your mother's activities.
Let me narrow that one down for you a little bit, because I've been running this through a little bit in my head as well. And is there a specific scriptural biblical reference prohibiting gambling? I know it's not in the Big Ten.
In the Big Ten.
Commandments.
Right.
Could you direct us to that? Because we do hear these moral opposition, and what
Sure.
I generally hear is that it's sort of violates the Christian work ethic of,
Sure.
working for what you earn and not, gambling. But
Sure.
I would love to hear it, and this is a serious question. I wouldn't joke about such a subject.
No, I understand, and I tried to mention the moral aspect of it because I do believe that it is a moral question, but I tried to make my arguments more of a practical statement, not necessarily the moral argument behind it, the revenue argument, the idea that it'll lead to more gambling. I believe that's the stronger argument than the moral question. But, the Bible does talk about that, just as you said, the work ethic and, not necessarily the risk component, but the idea of getting something without working for it is probably the strongest argument. If a man doesn't work, he shouldn't eat, is probably kind of what you're referring to.
That's helpful. I'm sorry, I kind of interrupted you, didn't I, Senator Albers? I apologize. You got the floor.
Thank you. And I didn't mean to put you in a box, and I'm not advocating for one side or the other, but this is a really important thing we should talk about. Back in our very first year here, the topic that had been long since debated of Sunday alcohol sales was brought up, and it was said to be a moral issue. At the time, I'm not sure if you were actively participating or not, did you support or work against that bill? Do you remember?
We were new. We were a new organization at the time. Active I'm not sure is the word I would use, but we generally opposed expanding access to alcohol.
So getting back to the moral issue, right? And if we're getting back to the Bible, and I would never consider myself a theologian. I'm sure your skills far outweigh mine, but I've read it cover to cover 5 times. I have never found anything moral because in the Bible that I was reading, it said Jesus' first miracle was to turn water into wine. In fact, not just wine, but fine wine. And I remember when we debated this on the Senate floor, in fact, Senate President Pro Tem was the one who passed it out of committee. we talked about this very issue, that a lot of those laws actually weren't going back to something biblically based. A lot of those were laws that were put in that were an affront to anti-communism and other things. So there wasn't always a direct connection. So the only thing I would ask is, as we have this conversation, when we use a word like moral, and we take that from the church, that let's make sure that we're all staying in our lanes, because what I don't want to do is make this a religious issue or a term that may not be factually accurate either. I think we should all do a better job, and I'm asking you to work with me on that.
Well, I appreciate that, and I believe that, it's very difficult when you start to distill the scriptures down, and, I certainly have studied it, and as others have, but when it comes to the issue of alcohol, the wine that's described, what was it? When the Bible, King James uses the word wine, sometimes it's referring to grape juice, sometimes it's referring to fermented alcohol. What exactly was that? It actually sometimes refers to just grapes, just the fruit of the vine. So, you can really get into the study of that. I don't think Jesus would have turned water into an alcoholic substance that clearly throughout the scriptures has been described in a very negative way. Could talk about alcohol in my own life and my father being an alcoholic and my uncle and his kids being alcoholics. I think we all know the detriment of alcohol and the negative impact on that. And I think it carries over into gambling as well. I think we can all just talk about how it impacts families negatively. And, I'll try to conclude my remarks by saying, when it comes to the addiction that's going to come from this, no one has denied when we make that point. When it comes to the bankruptcy that's going to come from more gambling, when it comes to the, broken homes and other problems that will no doubt come from more gambling, who's going to be dealing with that? Not the people here, the pastors I represent. That's who's going to be dealing with that. Okay. So that's the final comment I'll make on that.
I've got one additional question from Senator Ginn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand the situation that all of our committee members are in, and I applaud you for bringing your thoughts forward. For me, I dealt with this issue in my home Rotary Club 23 years ago. We debated this for several years as to whether or not to do anything to help the handicapped build handicap ramps, and we were looking for a funding mechanism. So it was a question of, okay, hey, we could do a raffle and use the proceeds of the raffle to build handicap ramps. And one of the things that for me, one of our most ardent fighters against doing the raffle said it was kind of interesting because we took him out to a couple handicap ramps, and he saw what we were doing by freeing people to get in and out of their homes. I mean, everything. I've worked on handicap ramps from 6-year-olds to folks over 90. Said and for me, I know it's not a perfect world we live in. Said there's no such thing as justification for what we do, but to me, it's kind of interesting. He came back to the club and he said, I don't know what we got to do, but I'm all interested in trying to build more handicap ramps. And if this is a fundraiser to get us there, so be it. If the proceeds of what this could generate help the people of Georgia to do things, whether it be health care or education or those kind of things. I didn't vote for the lottery when it was on the ballot 30 years ago or 25 years ago. But I look at what it's done, and it's given an opportunity to a lot of people that would have never benefited from that. And so for me, I realized, hey, maybe I made a mistake in not voting for the lottery. I'm not a big lottery player, but I asked you, is there such a thing as a benefit that warrants what we do? In this situation, that to me, I don't know what the right answer is right now, but I look at all of the good that we've done with the Hope Scholarship and others, and I know that wouldn't have happened without somebody taking a stance and saying, hey, let's do this for the benefit of the education of Georgia. And I just like to know what is there some mechanism that when I look at the benefits, there's some downsides to everything that we do. There's some upsides. What's your thoughts?
Some people call it pragmatism, but it's the idea that the end justifies the means. And I readily agree that some people who call themselves Christians embrace embrace that philosophy, but I think that's an immoral approach to things to say that, well, if the end result is good, then it doesn't matter how we get there. I think it's important how we get there.
Paul, we thank you for being here. We didn't
Thank
mean
you,
to
Mr.
get into
Chairman.
a theological debate with you. What we
I
will
wasn't
leave it
expecting
is
that.
your group of pastors opposes this bill, and the Georgia Baptist Convention opposes this bill.
Thank you for
All right,
recognizing that.
thank you. That's all our test. Wait, we got one last late entry. Rhonda Thomas, are you out in the hall? Are you here? Because we're knocking on the, come on in. We're going to give you 3 minutes because we're past our time, but we're happy for you to make the effort to be here with us today.
Thank you so much. I heard Hope Scholarship. Let's see. I'm nervous because I hadn't planned on doing this. But anyway, after 4 years of study, over 3/4 of all Hope Scholarships lose their scholarship. 40% leave college and only 45% regain hope. So I think it's valuable to look at how we're getting places. A little bit of good with a little bit of evil does not always equal good. And so I know that in the Bible there is no scripture that says that gambling is wrong. But there are scriptures that say we should not cause our brother to stumble. And I know that sex trafficking revolves around this, and Senator Clinton Dixon has 2 great bills for sex trafficking, yet we're going to bring this into our city, and therefore what we're doing good is going to bring a little bit of evil. So I think that we have to really consider who it affects, and no, it won't require money from the state, it sounds like, except for the money it'll cost us for the addiction programs and everything that goes along with it. So I hope that you all will not vote for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us today. With that, the meeting is adjourned. We will meet Tuesday afternoon, 3:30, same time, same place, and our subject matter will be sports betting Thursday. What's today? Yeah, okay. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman,
Thursday.
for hearing.
Thank you very much for
Appreciate
your
it.
presentation.